Good morning. I'm Dale Mullennix. I'm the Executive Director of the Urban Ministry Center here in Charlotte, and it's my honor to officially welcome you to this TEDx Day of presentations. I was honored to be included in the list of speakers a couple of years ago actually, and so I'm glad to be back with you. I just feel like before we get into this, we need to all acknowledge there's a ladder on the stage. That's all I need to say about that. Let me do a little market research first. How many of you are currently being motivated, challenged, inspired by the content of the political debate that's going on in election season? Anybody? By applause. Anybody inspired, motivated? Yeah, me neither. Today is about just the opposite. Today, you're going to be inspired. Today, you're going to be informed. Today, you're going to be motivated. Today, you're going to learn. Today, you're going to grow. Today is an amazing day. And one of the things that I discovered in my first experience with TEDx was what I would call a series of aha moments throughout the day. Wow, I never knew that had anything to do with that. I never knew that had anything to do with me. I never knew that was possible. And suddenly you're making all these connections and you're having all these insights that you didn't have unless you were here listening to these presentations. And so this is going to be a great day of learning. It's going to be a great day of connecting, a great day of aha moments. And I'm going to tell you just a quick story about an aha moment that changed my life. As I said, I'm the director of the Urban Ministry Center. I've been doing that for 20 years. But before I did that, I was a pastor at the Myers Park Baptist Church. Anybody here from the Myers Park Baptist Church? I better find out. All right, they may not like this story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. That church, which you can imagine in Myers Park with all the stately trees and homes and magnificent buildings of the church, on the corner of the great big sanctuary worship building, there is this little bitty chapel. It's big enough to hold maybe 25 people or so. And when I was there from the 70s to the early 90s, that building at that point was about 50 years old. And that chapel, I want you to know, the door had never been locked and the lights had never been turned off in 50 years. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For 50 years, the chapel was open to the community. And anybody could come and they could spend time in that chapel for prayer, meditation, just to be quiet, whatever. So one day, a relatively new member of the congregation had taken an early morning walk through the neighborhood and ended up in the chapel. And he decided that morning that he wanted to sing. So he picked up the songbook and he began to sing. And not long after he started singing, he noticed somebody was joining in. And he quickly looked around, and there in the little alcove of that little room, he sees a homeless man who had taken the kneeling cushions and made a bed, cigarette butts on the floor, bits of food strewn about. And of course, once he sees the man, then he becomes more aware of the odor coming from this man in the corner. So he quickly leaves. Of course, this is pre-email days, so he writes me a note, and he describes what he saw. And at the bottom of his note, in very bold letters, he said, "This is not what the chapel's for. Do something about it." Well, being a good Baptist, which means we are democratically led, I took this story to the congregation, and I said, "What do you want to do? It's your chapel." And people thought, gosh, the world has changed so much, maybe we can't keep our doors unlocked now. And other people said, you know, our forebearers built these beautiful buildings for us. We have to take care of them. Other people ask, are we even safe in our own church anymore? Well, anyway, we didn't resolve anything that day, but I made it a point. I wanted to see if this man was going to come back. So I went early the next morning to see if he'd return. Wasn't there. Went back the next day. He wasn't there. Then on the third day, I went early in the morning, went in the chapel, and sure enough, I saw exactly what the church member had seen. A man curled up asleep in the corner, kneeling cushions made into a bed, cigarette butts, food on the floor, foul odor. And in my most authoritative Baptist pastoral voice, I said, "Wake up!" And this man very slowly began to turn and move. And when he finally turned over, I saw his face, and I recognized the man as someone who was born and raised in the Myers Park Baptist Church. He had been drug addicted for 20 years, on the streets, living between here and Atlanta. And the only reason I knew him was because he'd come in the church about once a year and ask for some money. So the next Sunday I went back to the congregation. I said, "I've got new information about the man in our chapel. He was born and baptized in this church." And where week 1 we talked about our safety, the protection of our buildings and changing times, week 2 we talked about how did he get that way and what should we be doing to help him. The difference was obvious, wasn't it? Week 1, the man in the chapel was one of them. Week 2, the man in the chapel was one of us. Well, I'm happy to say that I work at a place that every day tries to declare there's no more us and them. You know, we're all us. Well, one of the things I love about what's going to happen from this time and to the end of the day is you're going to hear speakers talk about things that unite us as a community. Things that inspire us to see our commonalities and not our differences. Things that raise up our desire to recognize our neighborliness and diminishes condemnation. So I'm glad you're here. I hope you're glad you're here, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you.